Welcome to our demo tonight. I'm Julie Swanson Davis for Blick Art Materials. I'm here with a great support team behind me. We've got Tessa, we've got Ryan, we've got Ashley, we've got Whitney, the whole Blick family back here supporting us. Any questions you have, feel free to shoot them to us and we'll get back to you as soon as possible with some answers. But tonight we're going to talk about mandalas. Mandalas are super popular right now. We just love them. They're beautiful. They're delicate. They're lacy. They make beautiful decorations, and I'm just in love with mandalas, as I know some of you guys are. But mandalas throughout history have been more of a spiritual item, and many different cultures have created mandalas really for the purpose of meditation, for the purpose of expression, for the purpose of expressing some spiritual ideals and symbols. So a lot of times we'll get a stencil for mandalas, and we'll get the beauty and we'll get the decorative part of a mandala, but we're missing out on part of it if we don't make it ourselves. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about making your own stencil. And even though mandalas look so incredibly complicated, I've got an easy way to do it. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about stencils. Stencils are something that I think anybody can use, honestly. If you are a fine artist, if you are working in all kinds of different media, knowing how to make and use a stencil is a really good idea. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways tonight. I'm going to be using a stencil film, and this is from Graphics. It comes in different sizes. This is a 9x12 package of 3. There's also stencil film on a roll if you really want to make some giant mandalas, like if you want to do a wall piece or something like that. But we're only going to be making 1/8 of one, so you really can make them rather small and just repeat them. You can also use a paper stencil, and I know some of you have used oil board before for stencils. It works, but I need this one to hold up. So I'm using the blue stencil film. It's going to show up better on camera for you, and it cuts super easily. Let's talk now about some cutting tools. This is a great tool. Let me just kind of bring it over here. I don't have it plugged in, so it's not hot. I did not trust myself with a hot tool up here. This is a walnut hollow tool that comes with many different tips. This tip here is a pointed tip, which is really great. Let me get a piece of stencil film out here. If we wanted to cut a stencil, this could be hot. We could put our pattern underneath here, put it on a surface that isn't going to melt, so I would put cardboard underneath here instead of wood or my cutting mat. And then you'll just slowly push it through the film until it melts a piece away. There's different tips. This I really like the pointed tip because it gives you multi-part sides, so different widths. There's also a hot knife. There are different beveled chiseled tips that are great for cutting stencils. It's a hot tool, but it doesn't need to get very hot. There's a little bit of odor that comes off the plastic, of course, because you're melting plastic, but it's not bad. I recommend this tool for just about anybody, but if you are, especially if you're having trouble with maybe some hand strength, you know, if you have to do a lot of pushing and it makes your hands tired, that's a great tool to have. And now let's talk about designing a mandala. We're going to do 1/8 of a circle. And I just want to point out a fun little notebook here that I've really enjoyed using. This circular grid notebook from Koala. It has pages on the front and back, pages and pages of a perfect circular grid. And I as you can see here, I've been messing and sketching with my pencil, trying to come up with some personalized mandalas. I worked my initials into one of the sketches here, my daughter's name into one of the sketches, trying to make this one kind of look like angel wings with this one. So if you want to come up with some personal designs, and an easy way to sketch them out is with this little sketchbook right here. But because I like to make things really easy for you, I've posted on our bundle page with all of the tools. I've given you a stencil that we created here, and this is exactly 1/8 of a circle. And it's marked on the sides here with inches spaced out. So let's say that I wanted to do a 12-inch mandala. I would cut right here on the line where it says 6 inches. And if I wanted to do a very small mandala, say 3 inches, I'd cut here. Well, I have cut out one, but I used the entire sheet. So this is an 8-inch mandala. And even though my mandala is going to, the design's going to end right at this line right here, I have gone ahead and cut, there's some little lines hanging off the sides on the template. And I know it's rather hard to see here on this video, but maybe if I hold it up a little bit, you can see it a little better. It's important to leave those, and I'll show you why here in a minute. There's a dark line that marks the center, and so you're going to just fold on that center line, and you're going to create your design from either side on this line. Now, do you remember back when you were a kid? Maybe some of you were too young to remember this, but I remember cutting snowflakes in the wintertime. This is very much like that. Let me just bring up my design. I've got a pattern here that I just sketched out with a pencil, and then realizing I'm on video, and so I need to make it a little darker so you can see it, I went ahead and colored in the spots that I want to cut away. I've provided this template for you as well too. It's a very simple pattern, but you can see where I've used the grid lines, and I've made it symmetrical. It doesn't have to be symmetrical, but I did make a symmetrical design, and I kept the design coming in from either edge like that. And so you can imagine when I cut this out, I'm going to have the mirror image attached to it on this side. Okay, moving forward, let's take my piece of stencil film here, and I'm going to fold it. I want to make sure that my design fits in here well, and yet at the same time, I don't want to waste stencil material, so I don't want to make it any bigger than I have to. All right, I'll make it a little bit bigger than that. And first thing I'm going to do is kind of push it down with my fingernail, and then I'm going to want to get a good crease in it. So you can use a burnisher of any kind. I just happen to have this pair of scissors right here that has a great handle. You can kind of hear the squeak that it makes as I'm burnishing that fold down. And now I'm going to stick my design right up against that fold. And I want to hold that in place while I'm cutting it so it doesn't slip around. So now I've got a little bit of tape here that I'm just going to tape down either side. Kind of a good idea to use a transparent tape because it doesn't interfere with your design at all. I'll just go ahead and cut away my excess here. Save that for a small mandala. Okay, so now I could retrace it onto the plastic, onto the stencil film, but that's just going to take more time. One thing that's very important is keeping the edge over on this side, and also those little lines that I left on my template. So I'm just going to use a ruler and a permanent marker, fine line permanent marker that sticks to the film. And I'm going to determine the edge just so I can follow along with that later. You'll see why. All right. So this film is really super easy to cut out. And I see I didn't quite get that down against the fold. And I will regret it later if I don't, because my design is not going to be quite accurate. Oh, silly me. So I'm going to just use my fingers, push it down again. The little rip doesn't bother me because I'm not actually going to use that stencil, of course. There we go. I'll be a little happier with my design that way. All right, large scissors are great for cutting out the big lines. And then you might want a pair of small scissors on hand. And I'm going to really just whip through the cutting here because, of course, I'm doing a demo and I don't want you guys to have to sit here and watch me cut this entire thing. But remember what I said about the snowflake. If you cut from the edges, then that design is going to be repeated, of course, on either side. This stencil film, I'm just using some regular scissors here. Look how easy this is to cut. And of course, I'd slow down and take a little bit more time if I was not doing this on a video. But it goes so quickly. These are actually going to end up being heart shapes. This is kind of a geometric pattern. I do have another stencil that I'll show you in a bit that's really more random. It's really more of a free form. I'm not so concerned with the symmetry of it. All right, that's good enough. All right, I have one piece. Let me clear away some of my little trimmings here. Get those out of the way. I do have one piece right here in the middle that I can't reach with the scissors. So I'm just going to show you how easy it is with a regular craft blade to cut through. It does require a little hand strength because I am cutting through 2 layers of the stencil here. There are swivel knives and specialty knives that might make it a little easier to get around corners, but you can see how easy that was to just cut and pop out there. All right, now I'm going to open up my design, and you're going to see this is an eighth of a circle. I'll remove the paper. You might want to hang on to that if you ever want to use the design again and your stencil wears out, but really for the most part you're not going to need that. All right, and there is my design. I do need to have that line over on this side. The reason I've leave this line on the design is because that's where I'm going to hold this in place with a piece of tape. So let me just repeat that on this side. Okay, so now we have this fold in the middle, which is making my design not lay flat. That's not going to be very helpful. So if you have a regular household iron and keep it on a very low setting, such as a nylon or a polyester setting, you can just go ahead. Mine's not quite warm enough. You don't want to get too hot, of course, because then the plastic will start to melt. but just a pretty low polyester silk setting. You'll be able to press that crease right out of there, and then you'll have a nice flat stencil. Okay, let's put this into action, shall we? Okay, I'm going to bring up a panel. I'm using a Blick Studio wood panel. We've got a good cradle to this. I love the texture of a wood surface, and you can see from the designs that I've got, you can do some really beautiful stain effects with a wood surface. Now, I know somebody out there is going to ask me about priming the surface, and I will tell you that if you're going to do the design that I am demonstrating today, you are not going to want to prime the surface. You want to have the paint be able to soak right into that wood and stain it. So I would not prime it. However, if you are painting on wood surfaces, and they're just a beautiful surface to paint on, and you want to prime it but yet keep that wood showing through, then you can use a clear gesso. Yes, there are clear gessos, and you can look on the materials list and find out information about clear gesso. That seals it so that the paint sits on top and doesn't soak into the wood, but yet you can still see the wood pattern behind there. So I've marked kind of where I want the stencil to be, where I want my mandala to circle around. So I've got this little corner up here, and there's the stencil I just cut. Now I'm going to really use those lines, and I'm going to line that up against the line that I just drew. This could be anywhere on the page, but you can kind of see how much space that's going to fill up if you just lay it up there. And now I'm going to get some artist tape out. Artist tape is really built for projects like this because it holds as long as you need it to hold, and yet it is removable and doesn't leave a lot of residue. Also, on the materials list, folks, if you're not familiar with artist tape. Okay, I'm able to line this up against that black line. That's where it's important. And make sure I've got that little piece off there, a little extra, little dog hair, of course. It's got Tessa's laughing at that one because she's got dogs at home too and understands. Oh my goodness. Yes, they follow me everywhere I go. I've got a black one, I've got a white one, and yeah, there's dog hair of both colors everywhere I go. For paint today, I'm going to be using a Jacquard Lumiere. And I'm also using, because I want to have kind of a contrast between these are very iridescent, very metallic, very sparkly acrylics, and then I've got our own Blick matte acrylic. So I'm going to have a little contrast between the matte colors and the sparkly metallic colors that way. And I'm just going to work out of the jar. You know, of course, you might want to put it into a palette or put it into something that you can work off of, but I'm kind of limited to space right up here on the table, and it's just going to be easier if I go ahead and work out of the jar, so I hope you don't mind. I've got a burgundy color, and I've got a stencil brush. This is a Dynasty stencil brush, nice firm 3/4 Stencil Pro. And if you've ever used a stencil before and a stencil brush, I'm not going to assume that everybody has, but maybe you've seen how people just dab with your paint like this. And that gets it between the stencils, like so. I'm going to go up here around the edge, but I really don't like that fuzzy edge that's left by the stencil brush around here. You might, that's okay. But I have a wide Utrecht brush here. This is a 1 inch watercolor brush, and look, I'm going to take and put a little water on my brush, and I'm going to kind of follow the grain of the wood, and I can add a little bit more paint because, boy, did you see how fast that soaked in there? But I'm going to kind of get rid of that look there. I can pick up my tape too. You can leave those brushy marks if you want, or just add a little water. And it's almost like doing a watercolor wash into the wood. Love painting like that. Like so. Okay, once I'm done with that, I'm going to kind of allow that area to dry. And with it soaking into the wood, it's pretty quick actually. But while it's drying, I'm going to come along here and I'm going to position my stencil. If I got this in the right area, because this is kind of important, Tessa. Do I need to move that over? Can you see that? You're good now. All right, good. I lined up the tape. Didn't even have to retape it. I just picked it up. I moved it over. And I'm going to just repeat what I did. This makes it so easy. And you can see from my examples, you guys, how intricate it looks. And you know, if you've seen mandala stencils, they are very intricate. And you can just imagine how much time it would take to actually cut out something like that. I love that this goes so quickly, because I know you guys are like me. You know, we've got busy lives with everything that we do, and there's just, if we can do a craft and get something that looks this good and do it in a minimal amount of time, that just makes it so wonderful. Okay, you notice I'm kind of going around the lines that I put on the canvas here. I am lining up the stencil over and over. And of course, when I reach the edge, this is what's nice about having a cradled board here too, is you know, it's up off the table, so it's not like I really even needed to have something underneath there. And I didn't have to worry about the top edge here. I'd let it dry a little bit more, but I kind of want to get this finished for you guys, so I'm just going to risk smearing by putting it on top of wet paint. Okay, let's go this one. This one's going to really show you how this works. And you got to be careful about how you're lining it up with this one, because if I happen to get off just a little bit on my layout, which I think right there, I might need to adjust my stencil just a little bit where it's placed. So I've kind of lined it up just by looking at what's there. And again, it's also wet underneath there. I'd probably wait till it dried a little bit more, but it's also kind of fun to show you guys how fast I can whip one of these things out when I dig in and start. Okay. Coming up around the top here. All right, now we're really getting the idea of how this is working, aren't we? I'm going to move that up. Now, I'm going to continue on. Let's see, let's do the bottom part here, because that's kind of important. I'm going with the grain of the wood, kind of getting the stain look here with a wide brush, adding lots of water. It's really almost creating a watercolor effect, but yet I can still see the texture of the wood. And of course, I would continue on and fill this corner, and keep going with my stencil like that. Once my stencil was finished, I would take that over to the sink and just some soap and water, clean off any of the acrylic that's on there. If it dries on there, you might need a little bit of brush cleaner, a little pink soap, a little something like that in order to get that acrylic off of there. But they clean up pretty well, and then you can put it between two pieces of paper towel, dry it off, and it's ready to go again. But for now, I'm just going to put this aside and bring another one up for you to look at. Okay, so this one's a little further along, and it is a little bit of a different stencil too, because I didn't have that one made, so I already had some other ones made. And over here, I did another one with a little bit of the white. It's a little bit of a white. It's a different cut mandala stencil. So I did it very lightly and then did that watercolor wash over it so it lightened up to give a violet, and it's very subtle over here. And this one I created exactly the same way I just demonstrated to you, and then continued to fill in that burgundy color. I'm going to do just one more, start one more design here in the corner just to keep things moving. I have a 6-inch piece here. So you remember, if we went back to the template, let's just go back to the template here. I wanted one that was going to be smaller and different. So this one I cut, well, I said 6, but actually it's a 7-inch one, isn't it? I cut it along the 7-inch line and then folded it. Here's my design, exactly as I demonstrated with the first one, only smaller. And you can go all the way down to teeny tiny ones if you wanted. So you kind of hold this onto where you want it to be positioned. And I want to have a little bit of overlap here, definitely. I'm going to just kind of eyeball where I want this to line up. It doesn't really have to be exactly perpendicular, to tell you the truth. You can measure out exactly where you want it to go, but I don't know. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. As long as you've got it perpendicular, fairly perpendicular, that'll work. Okay, I'm going to bring out some beautiful gold paint for this one, and I've got a little smaller. Shake it up just a little bit. It's kind of important too to get all those beautiful micro flakes, mica flakes, mixed up in there. This is gorgeous paint. I truly love this. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I get excited and move ahead of myself. I got to get that tape back on the stencil. Sometimes if you don't get your stencil lined up exactly, it didn't really happen on the one I just demonstrated, but you might see a little line in between where the two stencils match up. And I can see that that really happened on my piece here. And this was a little bit too far, and there was a white gap. Easy peasy. I just took a very small brush and I painted over that gap, and then I didn't have to worry about it. And you really can't tell that it's a little bit larger on that side. All right, I see my black lines, and I'm just going to put my tape on real quick. It's wonderful that the tape just picks up and moves around. I know some of you guys who have worked with stencils before have used maybe a spray adhesive or a glue of some sort to hold the stencil in place. That's always kind of a problem, holding the stencil in place. And just being able to use a piece of tape makes it so easy and so fast. I wanted to show you how opaque the gold is, but yet there's a little transparency, so I'm not covering the stencil underneath. It's so cool how you can do some layers like this and layer your colors and layer your pieces. It takes a little practice, you know. I do have a smaller mandala up here on a smaller piece of wood panel. And to tell you the truth, I was testing with that one. I wanted to see how I was going to layer colors. And, you know, should I put the gold first? Should I put the burgundy first? What color should I use first and in what order? Not a bad idea to plan out ahead of time and practice that. You could even do that on a piece of paper first to determine where your stencils are going to be, what color order you're going to use. Okay, lining up here. Like so. Just going to do a couple of these. And of course, the lighter you use the paint, the more translucent it's going to be, and also it's going to dry a little faster. So don't overdo it on the paint and you'll have a little bit better result. And let's, of course, then if you're trying to do this, you'll need to add a little paint. Okay, I know that's wet, but I want to continue because this is the part where things get a little hairy, is when you try and line up. And I have made a mistake before and lined it up, really representing balance. And they're really, seriously, they are, once you get going, they are a lot of fun to try and determine how you can do things so that you have a symbol in there. Let's see, let's keep that on. I know I've done that both ways, but truly it does work a little bit better if you leave it on. And I'm just lightly going back and forth here. And it's okay with me if some of those brush strokes just stay like that. It doesn't have to be blended in. That one lined up pretty well. So I keep going and create an entire circle just as I did here, and then go clean it up. And let's talk a little bit about some of the pieces that I have here with me. I have a diptych that was created with 2 panels and just kind of lining them up and doing the mandalas over 2 panels here. This one I really wanted to point out because this is personalized. Let me bring up the stencil for that one. It's a little dirty because, of course, I did use it. Let me put this aside. I want you to be able to see this one. All right, put it here on the white paper so it's visible. As I said, it's a little dirty. But I did 2 M's joined together with a little heart in the middle. I happen to know a couple that's getting married this fall, and they both have the initials M, so I wanted to design a wedding mandala for them. And so I designed one with the 2 M's, and that's what you're seeing in this piece right here, is a wedding mandala. So think about personal symbols, think about things that you can work in. Of course, you're going to have to worry about mirror images, but there's ways of getting around that. And I am finished with my demo, but I always want to talk about how to seal things, especially with wood panels, because you guys aren't as familiar with wood panels, I'm sure. Because it's acrylic, sometimes we don't seal acrylic paintings. It kind of seals itself when you're using acrylic paint, but with wood panels, it kind of is important to do a sealant over the top. Now, you could use a spray varnish or a spray fixative of some sort. You could use a gloss and or a matte, whichever. I kind of prefer the matte varnishes, but I have a Liquitex high gloss varnish here. I have a Winsor Newton matte varnish. It kind of depends what you like. And I know some of you guys out there are thinking about resin, because resin is super hot right now, and a lot of people just love that really thick glossy coat. And yes, once the acrylic's dry, you could seal it with a coat of resin over the top of it. And it's very beautiful. Don't forget, because of the cradle here, you just paint it and finish off the edges a little bit. I also put out, just for another thing to talk about, you've seen modeling paste perhaps used with stencils. Say you wanted to have an area that was raised and then put the color on top. I would put down the stencil, I would put modeling paste on the stencil, allow it to dry so that it gets a little bit raised, and then put your color over the top of the modeling paste. It's time consuming, but worth it to get that little bit of texture. All right, well, I think I've covered everything. I hope that you guys will give this a try. It's a lot of fun, and it's just very satisfying to create your own mandala. So thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next time.